Good evening and welcome to the Drive at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. I'm your host, Roman. We have a terrific show planned for you today. First, the forecast from our IntellectualRadio.com Weather Center tonight. Today, mostly sunny and pleasant, high 73 degrees. Tonight, clear skies with a low of 51 degrees. Tomorrow, mainly sunny, temps 69 degrees. The rest of the week forecast looks like this. Wednesday and Thursday, sunny with a high of 69 degrees. Rain developing after midnight. Thursday and continuing to Friday as temperatures dip to the upper 50s. The Drive at 5 is also part of the Monday Night Mogul with One Sister to Another with Angela Johnson at 4 p.m. Straight No Chaser with Rhea Ray Harris at 6 p.m. Setting it off with John Stennis at 7 p.m. Maze Says with Maze Jackson at 8 p.m. Keeping It Real Estate with Harold Arnold at 3 p.m. The Drive at 5 is also part of the fabulous 5 at 5 on IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station. My guest to my left is the state representative of the 5th District. Please give a Drive at 5 welcome to State Representative Ken Dunkin. Welcome to the Drive.
Thank you so much, Roman. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I know.
Excited to be here.
Please give IntellectualRadio.com/iHeart radio station your background.
Well, first off, happy 5 at the Drive. The Drive at 5. I am Ken Dunkin. I have been a lifelong resident here in the great city of Chicago. Born and raised here in the city in Chicago's Cabrini Green. Second oldest of 6 children. I went to public schools, went to Jenner Elementary, Lincoln Park High School, graduated from there, graduated from Harold Washington College, Morehouse College. Graduated with my master's from the University of Chicago on the South Side, and just a person who's been serving and wants to continue to serve the people here in the great state of Illinois with laws and statutes that impact us in the positive. Happy to be here.
Let's see about that after the questions.
Oh, well, all right.
The Black Caucus, you used to be the leader of the Black Caucus. Or you still are?
Yes, I was formerly the chair of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus. That is correct.
I have some questions because there has been some word on the street and as well as in the newspaper about the Black Caucus and their reputation as being ineffective towards African American issues in the Chicagoland area. What is your response to that?
You know, that's a very interesting question, and as the former head of the Black Caucus, of the largest caucus down in Springfield, there are 21 of us in the House of Representatives, 10 in the Senate. We're dealing with a multifaceted and multi-level policy initiative that exists within a very short period of time from January through May. And I wouldn't say that we're not effective. I would say that we don't get a chance in a collective sense to tout some of the successes that the Black Caucus has been a part of. So if you look at a number of these expungement laws that exist from ex-offenders or individuals who were wrongly accused, if you look at a lot of these job training programs that exist here in the state of Illinois, if you look at the black judges that you have in the sub-circuit across this state, across this county in particular, those were efforts of the Black Caucus, past and present. If you look at some of the questions of fairness when it comes to allocation of dollars and resources, when it comes to health care, when it comes to schools, things are not perfect, but the Black Caucus has always been a humanistic consciousness when it comes to sort of how laws really impact people in urban environments. And when we win positive legislation, people across the state benefit tremendously as well. So, again, I cannot officially speak for the Black Caucus because I am not the head of the Black Caucus today, but we have played a major role in begging the question and pushing on issues in terms of, again, health care, access to quality schools. Again, we're the worst state when it comes to public educational funding, but you need to have individuals on the inside playing a strong role of advocacy and leadership to help shape policy as being humanistic and effective for all of our citizens. Can we be more effective? Absolutely, yes. There's not no question in my mind that we can do bigger and greater things. So we're on the path to doing some progressive things. But I think you should have the new chairman of the Black Caucus in and talk with her, State Senator Kim Lightford. Ask her. She's the head of the House and Senate Joint Black Caucus, and she can address a number of issues. There's a number of things, a number of pieces of legislation that we've supported over the years that all citizens benefit from. It's just, again, we have to do a better job at telling our story as Black legislators.
You mentioned telling your story just a few seconds ago. Why is it not out there? Why Tribune, Sun-Times is not covering effectively? You have even Black newspapers, Black radio stations, or like IntellectualRadio.com. Why the message is not being relayed to the community effectively enough of what you guys are doing in Springfield?
Very good question. First off, I'm here to give voice to legislative initiatives and issues from my vantage point. That's why I'm talking with you here. The Chicago Tribune, the Chicago Sun-Times, there's no one in the world that they're going to validate some of the initiatives that Black legislators promote and push for or fight against, because those are not our means or mediums of communication traditionally. Traditionally, we fought the Chicago Sun-Times, the Chicago Tribune, Crane Chicago Business because of their biased journalism or their negative disposition or them telling their story of us. And so it's important to have stations such as IntellectualRadio.com and other mediums whereas we can communicate effectively or at least talk about issues that are very, very specific about Black folk and how it is that we benefit or possibly don't benefit from certain pieces of policy and budgetary concerns across the state. So the other question is, where's Black media? Where is the strong Black social media that we can readily identify as the voice, as the consciousness of Black radio, be it intellectual, be it television, be it print? So again, it's imperative that we have our voice and that we make our way into these editorial boards. We do some of these co-ops, articles, that we start beating that African drum on telling our story.
The holidays is a couple of weeks away, and there is no state budget on the horizon. The governor said it could be a potential deal in January. However, resources such as LIHEAP and others are being affected as days go by. People are saying my lights and gas are shut off or about to be shut off. I can't get assistance, or little assistance is being implemented because of the budget. What is the plan to help them on the state side? Because people are hurting out here because there is no deal.
I agree wholeheartedly. And quite frankly, us Democrats, we passed the budget back in the spring of this year, or May of 15. And we passed the budget that really wasn't balanced, quite frankly, as we did the prior year. But we came up with a supplemental budget in the later spring. For example, the spring of 16 is when, I guess that was the time when we were supposed to come up with a supplemental budget. And by a supplemental budget is an additional budget where we can legislate more revenues to pay for some of these programs. Now, the governor, within his power and his jurisdiction, he was able to veto certain pieces of legislation. As a matter of fact, he vetoed all of our budgetary items, and which is forcing us to have to communicate and advocate and politic all over again to come up with a budget that he may deem responsible, or override a number of his pieces of vetoes, be it budgetary or policy-wise. Sometimes we've been effective, other times we have not been. We're at loggerheads, unfortunately. You have the various leaders, including the governor, fighting over what's right, what's not right, And the people like myself, well, you and others and citizens who sent us down there are at the brunt end of the political fighting or indecisiveness and in bad decisions, and that result from a veto or a non-agreed budget. So this is sort of the collateral damage that we're experiencing, and LIHEAP is one of them. As a matter of fact, the Black Caucus, before I even came there, played a major role, and while I was there, in forcing the utility companies, the gas and the light, to come up with special dollars to match the federal monies for the LIHEAP program. So a lot of us are more conscientious than people want to give us credit for. Some of these programs that we take for granted, that senior citizens rely on, that some of the schools rely on, outside of funding, we as a caucus have been very, very vocal and very strong, especially when it comes to healthcare, with dental care. I mean, there's a plethora of legislation that has gone on over the years that the citizens in general, not just black folk, but especially black folk, have benefited from. So again, our story always is not discussed or told in the public because the media, those mainstream mediums that you're speaking of, they tend to focus on what they deem as important for their community. And so, I'm just sitting looking at sort of journalism back in the day when Gus Savage, when Lou Palmer were around, when other voices and intellectuals who loved our community were around. Folk just like yourself and some of the listening audience, they had a duty and a strong sense of clarity, political clarity and consciousness about the black community. They talked a little bit more distinctively and consistently about what it is that we were doing down in the state's capital, and that made us more accountable. It also motivated us to come out and vote consistently. And so the mediums have shifted and changed with social media and Instagram and Twitter and all of these Snapchats really quick. But I think it's imperative that all of us as elected officials at the state level, at the county level, at the local level, that we remain accountable to the people who send us to these respective halls of legislation to come up with policy. Is there a linear approach to that? Absolutely not. There are bumps, there are hills, there are valleys, there are rivers and lakes to cross. It takes a lot to move certain pieces of legislation, especially if it's going to disproportionately benefit black folk. Folk get all excited about legislation that they perceive that's going to help our community, but yet they don't have an issue with us being massively incarcerated, massively undereducated, massively underfunded, and massively displaced when it comes to our fair share of the pie, even when it comes to drug laws. We came up with certain pieces of legislation that really sort of softened the criminal blow to heroin users, because there's been a major negative impact out in DuPage County, where a lot of the citizens there are this upper class scenario compared to them coming off of 290 in other parts of our community, buying drugs and going out there. So we came up with special legislation, special funding to address this issue of these heroin users from DuPage County, compared to when the crack epidemic hit this particular city, state, and this country. We were enhancing penalties, locking folk up for Ready Rock that were devastating and ravaging our respective community. And so that scenario are some of the dynamics that we deal with in some of these state legislatures or general assemblies that are very, very peculiar, unfair, and certainly unequal when it comes to administering certain legislation, certain support, and certain laws that disproportionately impact certain people.
A couple of weeks ago, State Controller said, "I don't understand why year after year we are faced in the same predicament, in the same situation. Why can't state lawmakers have a 5-year budget plan or a 10-year budget plan and just be done with it, instead of going year after year after year?"
That's an excellent question, and I'm open for anything that's going to be a part of solutions when it comes to the budget, because at this point it's overly politicized, both from a legislative standpoint as well as the governance standpoint. I mean, It makes no sense for us having this discussion, and we're in the fourth month of not having a full budget. We're in the fourth month of not having a safety net for our hospitals, financial safety net for our hospitals. By that I mean paying our providers, from physicians to dentists to nurses to any sort of comprehensive service level that are not necessarily hospital based, but also that's within our respective community. It doesn't make sense for us to not have to pay our child care facilities, to have certain programs, college bridge programs to mental health, not being funded. That's a major devastation for a lot of communities, not just the Black communities, but especially our community. And I think it is beneath all of us to have to adhere to a state government that I serve in, that all of us are part of, whether we're elected or not, whereas we're still collecting income taxes. We're still collecting every sales taxes and every aspect of fees that we can imagine. We haven't stopped doing what we're supposed to do as a state government when it comes to extracting from the citizen. Our issue is not being able to come up with a comprehensive budget that's responsible, that's going to impact all the citizens that we take money from. So now it's our turn to be reciprocal and responsible. But unfortunately, again, the governor vetoed all of the budgets, including the monetary award program, child care funding, a lot of our again, mental health programs are still devastated. A lot of our social service programs that a lot of people, vulnerable communities, depend on. Training programs, cadet classes, professional services and how we regulate them, etc. I mean, we are at bare bones at this point because we don't have a budget or a spending plan that was approved by our governor.
Not-for-profit organizations are suffering during the budgetary process as well. Some are losing their jobs because of no agreement. Will there be any budgetary relief for not-for-profit organizations that provide those resources? Because it's either they're going to close their doors by the end of this year if something don't get resolved for some programs.
I am supporting legislation that addresses emergency funding for some of these organizations in social services and health services. I agree wholeheartedly. You are so right. As a matter of fact, there are a number of organizations that have already shut their doors because they don't have a regular flow or any cash flow from the state capitol. The sad part about it, Mr. Murrow, is that they're providing services that we've requested as a state government to take care of our citizen or our taxpayers that we can't even provide for ourselves. We don't have the capacity. And so what we do is we come up with a contract with social service providers to provide after-school programs, to provide mental health services, to provide training dollars for our respective citizens. And so that's the sad part of where we are and how it is so important for us to implement a budget that's going to allocate resources back throughout the state so we can make sure facilities are reopened, some facilities are not closed, and that we can provide the protection, the insulation for our citizens to benefit from their state and wedge a partnership with the private industry. So it is a high time that we get our act together in the House and Senate in Springfield, and that our governor is responsible or responsive in this case when it comes to making sure that we have a solid, unified budget that all of us can support.
Black Lives Matter.
Yes, they do.
And you've been an advocate for that, very strong advocate.
Yes, sir.
But not-for-profit organizations is now saying Black jobs matter. Black jobs matter. The reason why they're saying that is because if they have a job, you wouldn't have the crime. So what is your response? What is the state legislators are doing to say Black jobs matter? Yes, it's Black Lives Matter, but Black jobs matter as well.
Excellent point. Black jobs matter because if a person's self-esteem is depleted because they don't have something to look forward to the next day, such as providing for themselves, for their families, for their communities, and for their city and their state at large. You're hopeless. Yeah, all right, sure. I'll smoke that. I'll snort that. I'll drink that. I'll get into some nefarious activities that's not only punishing myself, but that's negatively impacting their respective community. And when you're unemployed, if you're hurting yourself, your family is hurting. They're feeling that pain as well because you need to go to them for dollars and resources. If you're caught up in the drug community, if you're locked up in the penal system, your community is directly impacted with that. Your family is in jail with you as well because they're paying psychologically and emotionally. They're tapped. They're devastated that you are out there on the streets getting high or prostituting yourself or putting yourself in direct harm's way or being incarcerated. That takes its toll on families, loved ones, and even some of your, not just your nucleus family, but your extended family as well. And then, these collect calls coming to the house, or you putting money on the books for the commissary, them going out there to visit you. These prisons are downstate. These prisons are in rural areas where most black folk don't live. That's important. Those economies are being supported by black lives. And politically, those towns downstate, they are benefiting in federal dollars, state transportation, housing, economic development, and school funding because they have a prison population that is down there temporarily. They're putting them in the U.S. Census, and they're sustaining their level of representation in the Congress, and the State House, and the State Senate. And they're benefiting monetarily from government because they're accounting for those inmates that are locked up. But yet, as soon as they're done with serving their time, they put them on that train or bus back up to the city of Chicago, to Rockford, to Peoria, to Southeast Springfield, to Danville, to Decatur, with a shotgun behind them saying, look, get on that bus, get on that train, you're getting out of here. But thank you anyway for this 10-year census that we've tracked you with. So I am 100% clear of the importance and the sense of urgency that our community has to be a part of when it comes to the state playing an active role with helping to prop us up, because most of us are in our situation not out of default or that we are not intellectual, that we're less educated, or that we are more higher, we have a higher propensity for crime. Is because the state and the federal government and the local and the county governments play a direct role, in some cases an indirect role, with keeping us isolated from the economic and educational mainstream, which is the basis for any successful community. They have a sense of self-worth, belonging, and pride that catapults them and their spirit and their culture up to a respectable level where they don't have to go out, or they don't feel the need to go and disrespect themselves by shooting, hurting, or killing folk that look like them in particular. Because keep in mind, most blacks tend to kill other blacks. They tend to hurt and rob other blacks. That's because we're within the same perimeter or parameters of within each other. We live with each other. And so black on black crime is alive, and it's unfortunately sort of a big swell, a major uptick over the last several years in cities like Chicago in particular. So we're on the same page with that. I have no reservations whatsoever to not support special legislation to deal with our population by way of more resources.
So you're saying to the Black Jobs Matter, which is developing a movement, so to speak, you're all for it?
1,000%. And lastly, Black Jobs Matter, it's imperative that all of us in the House of Representatives, all of us in the State Senate, are being held accountable and we need for you to help us craft an agenda specifically, because we don't have all the answers. An effective legislator knows how to listen to his or her constituents.
And I have another question to piggyback what you said earlier. You said incarceration. Marijuana has been on the books for quite some time. The ounces, the kilos, or whatever. Some police officers that I have spoken to are confused of what's on the book, and they arrest them anyway. They don't cite them, they still arrest them. What would you say to that?
Well, first off, no police officer should be stopping, let alone arresting anyone if they don't have clear understanding and discretion of the law. They need to go back to their watch commander, back to their district commander, or someone to find the facts of what the new state law is. The state law allows for municipalities to not charge individuals with some certain classes, certain class felonies or class. And I'm not an expert on criminal law, but the city of Chicago, basically, if you're not in a position to, if you have a small quantity, that's a fine in the city of Chicago. And what we're doing at the state level is looking at legislation to further reduce. Actually, we passed a number of pieces of legislation that reduces the penalty for being in possession of marijuana, because that's for personal use. It's a little different than having pound or kilos of drugs. So that's the big discussion that we're having right now by way of the president. That at the state level, Republicans and Democrats understand it. Now they're talking about it because it's costing us money. See, back in the 90s, under the Clinton administration, he locked up the most, during his 8-year reign, he locked up more Americans in the history of any U.S. president. Now, I understand at the end of the summer, this past summer, he recently apologized for those measures. Ron was his guy down there. They authored a piece. There's a publication that's out of the prison industrial system or the prison code laws that came during the Clinton administration. So this over-saturation of laws across these states is not just at the federal level, but at the state level as well, to fill up these prisons, shifted the paradigm from farm subsidy to correctional officer prison industry benefits. If you imagine you're out of high school and you walk into a prison making $40,000+, tons of overtime. Your sister, your mother, your father, your brother could work in the same prison. It becomes a very incestuous community where people are benefiting from what? Crime. And they say, well, we're not sending them down here, but some of these nonsensical laws of if you're stealing something over $300 is a felony, that can send you to prison. We've changed that and raised it up to $1,000 here in the General Assembly. There's those type of laws where you have a small amount of crack cocaine caught with a rock, let alone 3 rocks, you're going to prison, compared to cocaine or heroin. Heroin, we'll say, in certain towns in DuPage County, they're saying, we're not going to lock them up. We're going to offer them treatment. We're going to have them stay here for a few. That wasn't the case when it came to identifying and associating crack cocaine with black folk here in this country. So what I'm saying is, let's be smart on crimes, especially violent crimes. Let's not over arrest people, over penalize folk to the point where they're taken away from their jobs, their family, their communities, and they're in a situation where they have an X on their back for the rest of their lives, by and large, unless we, the Black Caucus in particular, come up with legislation that everybody benefits from when it comes to expungement. Dorothy Brown, she has all of these, and I believe Congressman Davis as well, all of these expungement laws. Those are laws that a lot of the members of the Illinois Legislative Black Caucus championed back in the 90s, prior to that, and today. I remember State Representative Lou Jones talking about the C class numbers of the prison population. She wanted, those individuals who were locked up in their 70s and who were going in their 30th or 40th years. These are individuals who are like 60-something, 70-something years of age. She advocated for them being released. So you've had Black Caucus in on and shaping a lot of policy decisions down there. Again, mainstream media would never cover it. The political rags don't come down there to cover it. So we have to do a better job as legislators, period, or in general, to getting our voice out there. So most of us are highly conscious. Some of us look at things a little differently. I'm not just happy to be dressed up, happy to be in a room with other folk, acting like I'm important when I know that my community is suffering.
To piggyback off what you said, again, you mentioned DuPage County. There's a recent survey study that came out today. According to AP.com, they said that
Associated Press?
Associated Press, yes. They said that DuPage County and blacks being stopped, more people from DuPage County has been stopped by police with drugs and heroin, as you mentioned, in their car. When they go on to 90, they stop a black individual and they find little marijuana and they go to jail. What is the difference there? Because this is in black and white.
Sure.
There was a study a couple of months ago. The ACLU did a study regarding policemen in Chicago stopping African Americans more than whites.
And they're not only stopping them, they're more inclined to arrest them, for having small amounts of marijuana. So I addressed this last year to the mayor and Gary McCarthy when we had a criminal justice committee last year. And it's on my website at repkenduncan.com. repkenduncan.com is my website, and you can look in the video section. I addressed this. And the superintendent of Chicago's police said, well, they were arrested because they didn't have any identification on them. I'm saying that in order for relationships to develop in a different or shift in another paradigm, the new training, a certain level of community consciousness or cultural competency is going to have to be the order of the day, especially when it comes to how you address certain malfeasance. You smell marijuana, okay, is it a crime? It's a crime if you have massive quantities with what one could surmise as intent to distribute, but to have to arrest someone because they have small amounts is a waste of all of our time. The taxpayer times with that police officer, certainly processing someone to go to jail. And it's no secret that blacks are disproportionately stopped, arrested, and processed, incarcerated when it comes to other whites with similar or worse crimes. The United States Justice Department today came out with a study that discussed felonies getting callbacks, and they had a clear distinction between whites who were called back and blacks who were called back with felonies. Now this is the United States Department of Justice. Just this weekend, October, what's today? November 2nd?
Mm-hmm.
Came up with this, and whites were 3 times more called back if they had a felon, about 35% compared to blacks at 10%. With a felony with a very similar educational or skill set training background. These inherent discriminatory factors are real. And so what I'm simply sharing with you is that you can't legislate behavior all the time, because you're going to always have knuckleheads out here who are going to violate the law, going to take things in their hand and violate people's civil rights and civil liberties to their own advantage. But we can play a stronger and more aggressive role in giving voice to the voiceless.
When we come back on intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station, more with State Representative Ken Dunkin. And we're back on intellectualradio.com/iHeartRadio station. The Drive at 5 continues. My guest to my left is State Representative from the 5th District, Ken Dunkin, and also to his left is Rhea Ray, who has a question for State Representative. I'll put the shades on because it's going to get real.
So bright. That's why.
Ken Dunkin. Oh, she's one of our Straight No Chaser,
which will be on right after.
Come on.
This is my question. I had read as a probation officer, which is what I am during the day, the bill that stated basically that the applications for employment could only ask about someone's criminal history later in the process. And I contacted Representative, I think it is, Christian Mitchell, who was one of the co-legislative parties to put that bill up. And I let him know that in my experience with my clients, because I have been a probation officer for what will be 26 years, December 1st, woohoo, that the bill is not working, because what's happening is once they get to that point where they can be asked about it, then they're still kicked out of the rotation. And so when I inquired as to what was the intent of the bill and would there be any possibilities to reform the bill to make it more of what it's obviously supposed to do, which was to get more employment, I got a couple of callbacks, but then no more responses. So
is this the ban the box concept?
It is similar to the ban the box concept.
In other words, have I been convicted of a felony or crime? You're saying remove that?
No, I'm saying that I can't remember the number of the bill, but it's HB blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And it basically stated that the employers could not start off the application process asking about the criminal history, but they did have a chance later on to inquire about it. And what I was letting Representative Mitchell know is when they got to that point where they could ask, those employers who had no intentions on hiring someone with a criminal background, wipe them out. So with the purpose being to increase the employment of people that had criminal backgrounds, is there a way to modify certain legislation to help clients in those conditions, because it really hasn't changed anything outside of them going through a longer process and then getting more frustrated because they still get the same result?
Sure. Excellent point of view. And I'm telling you, the questions that are being asked on this show is an education and clarification, re-education for folk like myself. And other legislators from across the state need to get a real common sense of the impact of certain laws that we come up with. Sometimes we come up with these great ideas, but in reality, they don't translate. So all we're trying to do is to take the initial sting off of, oh, this person has a felony. Toss that application in the garbage. We're trying to give them a fair opportunity to communicate and present themselves and their credentials before you make a prejudge based off of them checking a box that says, yes, I have been convicted of a crime. Because as it highlighted today, the United States Department of Justice said that blacks are not being called. You know, the whites were at about 35%. We're at 10% with felonies. Now, the other piece is How do you legislate behavior and perceptions? I don't know that answer. But the legislation's intent, which of course I supported, was to at least break the ice in a different way. You know, if you're out at a business meeting, or if you're out at a party and you're attracted to someone, you don't necessarily want to see their bad side. We all have sort of gray areas, I guess, and bad sides as well, but we want to see the good side. I think it's the good side that really attracts us, or that sustains us with next steps in our conversations. And so that was the intention of the legislation. But you still have individuals who have these perceptions, who don't want to mess with an ex. I say, if you have a former check kiter or a bank robber, you might not want to hire them at your bank or at your financial institution or your cash ready currency exchange. I get that. But that person can also, they can do everything from become a stylist. They can own a mechanic shop. They can be a consultant. They can play a stronger role after they've served their time. They've moved on with their lives to not have you discriminate against them. And so these, again, and the president's initiative on the ban the box is now it's at the national stage. There are probably about 16, maybe 10 states, 10 or 12 states that have the ban the box portion that's out there. Most of these states are states with large municipalities. So how it is that we educate people from not discriminating and to playing a better role with giving someone a second chance or a third chance in some cases. I just don't have that magic bullet for the solution.
Right. It's very troubling because my clients are domestic batterers. I work at the domestic violence court. And even though 95% of those are misdemeanors, when someone sees domestic violence on a background history, they shut down instantly.
Sure.
So it's a vicious cycle because they can't get employment. They don't have really a place to stay unless they're staying with mom or grandmom or cousin or with the young lady with whom the incident occurred. And the propensity and the recidivism rate increases because they don't have a place to live, because they can't find a job, and because landlords are also running background checks and saying, well, we don't want him or her here either. So it's very hard.
It is. And what we need to do is to modify some of these domestic violence laws after a certain amount of time. If there was one incident, or if they're compared to a serial
a
DV,
repeat offender.
You know, those are different scenarios. Sometimes unfortunate flare-ups come about where a police is called, and really whoever's called, that's who the police believe. They arrest the person who didn't call, or it's a race to the police station.
Or it's because I'm a woman and I may be the aggressor, but if I'm a woman,
the benefit of the doubt is going to the woman
most of the time.
Right.
And domestic violence cases never come off your background.
Exactly, unless the state General Assembly legislates that to the point where after a certain period of time, or if there has not been a pattern or a long history of that, people need a second chance. Because, again, everything is not black and white as someone may report. And some people use the domestic violence laws as a sword.
Yes, they do.
Instead of a shield.
Yes, we had that conversation with the young lady, Miss Moore, who's running for Cook County State's Attorney, because I brought that to her attention, because they do not prosecute women or men who are alleged victims who you find out later were perjuring themselves.
Yes.
They will not prosecute them.
Yes, and so the reality is down in Springfield, I've seen so much political cowardice when it comes to certain hotbed issues. Domestic violence is one of them. And I'm saying after a certain amount of time, people should, unless you were a serial domestic batterer, and I don't support male or females fighting each other at any time. You know, you can always leave. You can always walk away. But there's a real culture of advocacy for the domestic violence, the women, and these laws are there. The laws are not necessarily coherent with what the times are. Sure, you want to protect those individuals who are truly battered, But you also have to understand those people who know how to play the game and pimp the system to their advantage.
Yes, I'm asking you personally because I brought this up many times. Could you please have someone on the state level consider a reciprocal order of protection? Because right now it is a one-way order of protection in the state of Illinois, which means if I have an order of protection against you, I can call and harass you, but the moment you respond, I call the police and you're going back to jail.
Interesting. So, okay, this is where the real education comes. So what occurs if you are harassing me?
Nothing, because once I have an order against you, you cannot get an order against me, and it's not reciprocal.
What, can I call the authorities and make a complaint of you harassing me?
And they're going to do nothing because there is no reciprocal order.
That's very interesting.
And the obligation is on you to stay away from me. It's not on me to stay away from you.
Gotcha. Again, smart on crime and not just coming up with statutes that say, all right, arrest. That's been our culture across the board here in the state for so long. And there are certain legislators who led that charge, and members do not want to be on the wrong side, quote unquote, of the law when it comes to domestic violence.
I just wanted to bring that to your attention. I thank you so much, Roman, for your time. And I thank you so much. So I hope you do have a chance to, at some point, have that conversation because that's real.
That's straight, no chaser.
Yes, it is.
All right. Speaking to Rhea's point, breaking news, Congressman Danny K. Davis and other lawmakers announced the public housing initiative to help ex-offenders or offenders arrest would no longer to be only the criteria for public housing. Some people will say, I play by the rules. And I understand mistakes happen. However, majority of the resources is going to ex-offenders instead of people playing by the rules. You say what?
I say the folk are spot on. There are a number of individuals out here who play by the rules, and yet there are very little, especially if your income is so-called middle class, you don't qualify for anything, not special benefits for housing, for transportation, for scholarships, for a sliding fee scale when you go to the clinic or the physician's office where you have to maybe possibly co-pay because you're in a particular threshold. If you make $70,000, that's a lot of money for some people. But if you have 4 kids, if you have 3 kids, you have to pay for school, you have to pay for their lunch, you have to pay for their after-school program, you have to pay for summer camp, you have to pay for every aspect of the straight pay, no chaser, no discount. You don't qualify for LIHEAP. You don't qualify for subsidized bus riding, quite frankly. So these people, they do the right thing. That's why when President Barack Obama was running, he only talked about the rich and he talked about the middle class. He rarely, I never heard him at least, talked about the poor. Because the middle class are burdened with the property taxes. They're burdened with the garbage taxes that all these aldermen, too many aldermen voted for. They're burdened with paying up front and on the back end of things. Ex-felons should get a second chance, but I don't think they should disadvantage those individuals who do play by the rules. I think they shouldn't get an up over the people who never violated our respective community. And those who violated our community, you got to make some kind of segue for them because of, they did serve that time. And oftentimes they serve a very harsh time or sentence. They also did a negative crime situation in our respective communities, but they shouldn't be trumping the law-abiding citizens who, as you state, play by the rules. So I agree with him.
So I'm going to ask Oral and Rhea. I'm going to ask a couple of more questions. I know I'm running a little bit out of time, but I have to ask this question, and I cannot let you get out of here without asking this question. You were in the news a couple of weeks ago regarding your no vote towards the budget. House Speaker Michael Madigan said this bill would have passed because no vote from you. What would you say to the people who have said, you know what, this could have been solved already? State Representative Ken Dunkin was not there. You say what?
Well, first off, members miss days. I was not there. However, my voting record is stellar when it comes to supporting working families, the middle class here in the state, responsive legislation that deals with job creation, that deals with supporting unions here in this state, that supports a budget that is responsible. So the fact of the matter is, if I'm not there, for example, with the child care bill, that bill is still alive. That was sort of an inside baseball vote, but there was no formal vote. So I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation. Just as an example, I voted for it in the spring. But sometimes every member is not going to be there. The average member, at least this past summer, showing up was about 105 out of 118. And the speaker said that. Why? I'm befuddled because the bill failed, the union bill that they're talking about, House Bill 2665, it failed by 3 votes, not one Ken Dunkin vote, of members who were there who voted against it. So whether I was there or not, the bill would have failed.
Period.
Bottom line.
African American activist, and I know I'm running out of time. African American activist is criticizing some black legislators, saying
Spit it out.
Plantation politics. I'm sorry. I was rushing there. Let me readdress the question. African American activist is criticizing some black lawmakers, saying plantation politics, doing whatever the speaker is telling them what to do. What is your response to those speakers? Because they're not talking to you day to day. They're not going on your website day to day. They're saying and hearing what is going on, like we mentioned earlier, the other news outlets. You say what?
First off, I don't work for Speaker Michael J. Madigan. I work for the people that live from Division and LaSalle Street to Rush Street, all the way to 79th and Paxton, east of Jeffrey, literally from the Gold Coast to the Soul Coast. And I've always conducted myself or adhered to the constituents that send me down to Springfield, so graciously and humbly sent me down there. Now, I can work with anybody, the speaker included, my senators included, the governor included, anybody who wants to work towards the betterment of my community, of my district, and do responsible legislation that's within my respective district. Is there a sense of follow the leader down there? Absolutely. And citizens are going to have to start challenging their black state rep and state senator on what it is that they're doing down there, what they're accomplishing, and what's in it for black folks, as Mays Jackson points out quite often. At the end of the day, when this budget stalemate is over with, when we come up with a budget that's going to fund these various programs, is it going to create jobs for us in our community? Is it going to stem the tide of mass black incarceration? Is it going to provide a real health safety net for black families? Is it going to reduce the drama when it comes to drug laws that impact us disproportionately? Now, keep in mind, there are more whites on public welfare than blacks in this state, as there are in any other state in this union. But disproportionately, we are bearing the brunt of the criminal justice system, of the lack of health care funding, of the lack of or the inferior school system. And those are some of the basic questions that citizens need to ask their black state legislator in the House or in the Senate, whether they are new there or whether they've been in there for 10 or more years. What are you doing, and how is it going to impact me and my community, since we are disproportionately on the back end and the negative end of some of these policies that we come up with in our state's capital?
In all fairness, some people and critics say, you guys always talk tough when it comes to election time. You puff up your collar and all that good stuff, come up with good ideas, but nothing is being done.
Well, I can't say that that's a misjudgment. First off, I've passed this year over.
I'm not directing that.
Sure. Because we don't get the type of coverage that we feel as if we deserve, maybe in this one city. So we have 102 counties across the state, and the media outlets, they focus on the speaker, the Senate president, or the governor. They rarely focus on legislators, let alone black legislators, because there's a culture of everyone has to follow the speaker or follow this direction. But I'm here to tell you that we come up with very responsible legislation, from sex trafficking to foster care laws to utility reform to transportation laws to reduction of some of these criminal codes to helping people out at the insurance level, at the banking level. People coming up with responsible legislation that's going to add value to a lot of citizens here in the state, not just black folk. But there's so many pieces of legislation. We're talking at least 4,000 pieces of legislation that is introduced in the House and Senate combined, that it's overwhelming for sometimes certain members to articulate it to a type of media. It's difficult for the journalists to focus in on that one gotcha moment, like, oh, I want to get you in here. What's happening with the monetary award program for health, for our schools? What's happening with certain pieces of legislation that addresses animals? I mean, it's or police training. So there's a whole myriad or plethora of pieces of legislation that people will say, oh, that's some good legislation. Well, maybe it's not so good, that people just are not aware of. So I'm here as a state lawmaker to serve and to not talk tough just because it's election time. To me, every day is election time. And if you're serving the people, you don't have to be campaigning when it comes to election time.
Now you can wear your glasses.
As they say, partner.
Now, if someone wants to get a hold of you,
you can reach me at 773-363-1411. 773-363-1411. State Representative Ken Dunkin.
See, it wasn't that bad, right?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
You're a great host.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I don't think everybody else thinks so. No, I'm just joking. That's going to do it for us on The Drive at 5. Thanks to Earl Winfrey and Rhea Ray, who is up next with Straight No Chasers. Coming up next week, an exclusive interview with Andrea Zopp in studio. Coming up on The Drive next week. Have a good one, everyone.